"Let's keep the main table for actual family," my daughter-in-law said with a smile as she moved my plate beside the children's folding table near the kitchen door. Nobody argued, not even my son. I stood there for a second holding my glass of iced tea while the room filled with the soft clinking of silverware and polite laughter. Thanksgiving dinner at Jason's house used to feel warm. Years ago, my wife Eleanor would spend 2 full days preparing everything herself. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon rolls would drift through the house before sunrise, and Jason would sneak pieces of pecan pie before dinner when he thought nobody was looking. Back then, family meant something different. Now I sat 3 feet away from my own grandson, while strangers occupied the seats where Eleanor and I once hosted holiday dinners together. Melissa adjusted the centerpiece and laughed quietly when one of her friends asked who I was. "Walter stays in the guest space out back," she said casually. "He likes keeping to himself." I noticed the hesitation in the woman's smile after that. The kind people make when they realize they've accidentally stepped into someone else's family tension. I simply nodded and sat down beside Ethan, who was too young to understand why his grandfather had suddenly become invisible. The turkey was getting cold by the time Jason finally looked at me. "Dad, you okay over there?" he asked without really waiting for an answer. I smiled lightly. "I'm fine." That was the thing about getting older. People stopped listening after the first reassuring sentence. They wanted comfort, not truth. The dining room glowed with soft amber light from the chandelier Eleanor picked out 20 years ago. Melissa had redecorated almost everything else in the house after she moved in, but somehow that chandelier remained. Maybe because replacing it would have cost too much. Maybe because she forgot it belonged to my wife. Halfway through dinner, Melissa stood up to make a toast. She thanked everyone for supporting the future of the family, while Jason wrapped an arm around her waist. I noticed she never once mentioned the past. Never mentioned Eleanor. Never mentioned the man who built the ranch they all now treated like a country club. I excused myself quietly before dessert and walked outside into the November cold. The air smelled like pine trees and chimney smoke. My old pickup truck sat near the detached garage exactly where I'd parked it earlier that afternoon. In the truck bed was a small cedar box wrapped carefully in a gray blanket. I stared at it for a long moment before opening the driver's side door. Inside that box were documents nobody in that house knew existed. And by the following week, everything they thought belonged to them would stop belonging to them at all. The guest room behind the garage used to be my woodworking space. Eleanor once called it my little kingdom because I spent entire weekends building shelves, repairing old chairs, and listening to baseball games on a dusty radio near the window. Now the workbench was gone. Melissa had turned half the room into storage for holiday decorations and unopened delivery boxes. My bed sat against the far wall beneath a narrow window that rattled every time the wind picked up across the ranch. I woke up early the morning after Thanksgiving and stared at the ceiling for a long time before getting dressed. The small coffee maker on the counter sputtered weakly while pale sunlight crept through the blinds. I could hear the faint sound of Ethan laughing inside the main house as Melissa prepared him for school. Years ago, Jason used to laugh like that every morning before I drove him to elementary school in my old Ford truck. Back then he would run ahead of me carrying a lunchbox Eleanor packed by hand. Peanut butter sandwiches, apple slices, notes folded carefully into napkins. I remembered every detail because fathers remember the little things long after everyone else moves on. By 8 o'clock, the ranch was quiet again. Jason had already left for the office downtown. Melissa's white SUV backed out of the driveway without a glance toward the guest house. I waited another 20 minutes before walking into the main kitchen. The coffee pot was still warm. A stack of dishes sat in the sink beside a vase filled with decorative eucalyptus branches Melissa bought from some expensive home store. She liked the house to look polished for visitors, even if it no longer felt like a home. I opened the refrigerator and noticed something strange immediately. Eleanor's old handwritten recipe cards were gone from the side door where they had been taped for nearly 20 years. Thanksgiving stuffing, Christmas ham glaze, peach cobbler, all gone. I checked the kitchen drawer where Melissa shoved most things she considered clutter. Nothing. Then I noticed a black trash bag sitting beside the pantry door. Inside were photo albums, framed pictures, and several sweaters that used to belong to Eleanor, folded away like unwanted reminders. I stood there quietly holding one of her blue cardigans in my hands while the refrigerator hummed softly behind me. The house suddenly felt colder than the November air outside. That was when I understood something important. Melissa was not simply redecorating. She was erasing. Every trace of the life Eleanor and I built together was disappearing piece by piece, while Jason pretended not to notice. I carefully placed the cardigan back into the bag and carried everything to my truck before anyone returned home. Then I drove into town and rented a small storage unit under a different name. By the time I locked the metal door behind me that afternoon, I had made up my mind. They thought they were slowly pushing an old man out of the family. What they did not realize was that I had already begun leaving on my own terms. 3 days later, I came back from the feed store just before sunset and noticed Melissa's car already parked in the driveway. The house windows glowed gold against the cold evening sky, while Christmas music drifted faintly through the kitchen speakers. For a moment, standing there with a sack of birdseed in my arms, I almost remembered what normal felt like. Then I heard my name from inside the dining room. I stopped before opening the front door. "We cannot keep waiting forever," Melissa said quietly. "The ranch taxes alone are ridiculous." Jason answered in a lower voice I could barely hear. "He is still my father, and he is living in the guest house while we carry everything," she replied sharply. "You know, Harold said the property transition would be easier if Walter signs before the end of the year." I stayed completely still outside the door while cold wind brushed across the porch. Harold Whitmore, the family attorney. Eleanor never trusted him. She used to say he smiled too quickly whenever money entered the conversation. I heard the sound of papers sliding across the table. "You already moved most of Eleanor's things," Jason muttered. "Maybe slow down a little." Melissa laughed softly, the way people laugh when they believe they are being reasonable. "Jason, your father barely notices anything anymore. He still thinks this place runs like it did 20 years ago." There was a pause after that, long enough for me to understand something painful. Jason did not defend me. He did not say I built the ranch from empty land with my own hands. He did not mention the years Eleanor and I skipped vacations so he could attend college without debt. Silence can reveal more than anger ever will. I quietly stepped away from the door and circled back toward the guest house before they realized I had returned. The sky had turned dark blue by then, and the porch light near the garage flickered weakly in the wind. Inside my room, I set the birdseed down beside the dresser and opened the cedar box from the truck. The old documents rested exactly where I left them. Property records, original partnership agreements, trust amendments Eleanor insisted we create after Jason married Melissa. I ran my fingers slowly across Eleanor's signature near the bottom of one page. Her handwriting was small and careful, just like everything else about her. Back then I thought she was worrying too much about the future. Now I realized she had seen this coming years before I did. Around 9 o'clock, Jason knocked lightly on my door carrying a plate of leftover pie. "Thought you might want dessert," he said awkwardly. I thanked him and took the plate without mentioning what I had overheard earlier. He stood there for another second like he wanted to say something important, but instead, he just nodded and walked away. I closed the door gently behind him and looked down at the untouched pie in my hands. The crust smelled like Eleanor's recipe. Melissa must have copied it from one of the missing cards before throwing the originals away. That night, I could not sleep. The wind rattled the thin guest house windows while memories kept drifting through my mind like old photographs floating across dark water. At 2 in the morning, I finally gave up and sat at the small kitchen table with a cup of black coffee growing cold between my hands. There was a time when Jason used to sit across from me at that same table doing algebra homework while Eleanor baked blueberry muffins before sunrise. He used to ask me questions about everything back then. How engines worked, why cattle moved differently before rain, whether hard work always paid off. I used to think I had the answers. When Jason was 16, he wrecked my truck trying to impress a girl from school. I still remember how terrified he looked standing in the driveway waiting for me to come home. The front bumper was crushed. One headlight hung loose near the tire. He expected yelling. Instead, I handed him a wrench and spent the weekend teaching him how to repair the damage himself. Eleanor watched us from the porch swing with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and smiled every time Jason figured something out on his own. "You are raising a good man," she told me once. Back then, I believed her completely. Years later, when Jason wanted to start his own development company, the bank turned him down twice. He was 28 and desperate. Melissa had just entered his life around that time. Smart, charming, ambitious in a way that impressed people at first. Jason sat in my office one rainy afternoon, staring at rejection letters spread across my desk. I remember the exact sound of rain hitting the ranch windows while he tried to pretend he was not ashamed. "Maybe I am not cut out for this," he said quietly. I opened the safe behind my desk and handed him documents transferring partial land rights he could use as collateral. Nearly everything Eleanor and I had spent 30 years building went into helping him secure that first business loan. I never told anyone how much risk was involved, not even Jason. Fathers are supposed to make sacrifice look easy. That is part of the job. The company succeeded faster than any of us expected. Within 5 years, Jason was appearing in local business magazines wearing expensive suits and smiling beside Melissa at charity events. Reporters called him self-made. I never corrected them. Eleanor wanted me to, but I told her it did not matter. "One day he will remember who stood beside him," I said. She looked at me for a long moment after that, before quietly folding laundry beside the bed. "Walter," she said softly, "sometimes people become so comfortable being carried that they forget they were ever falling." At the time, I thought she was worried too much again. Sitting alone in the guest house years later, I finally understood what she had been trying to tell me all along. The following Tuesday, I drove into town earlier than usual because I needed air that did not smell like stale resentment and artificial cinnamon candles. Winter had started settling over the valley, and the sidewalks downtown were lined with wreaths and white string lights hanging from old brick storefronts. Eleanor loved this time of year. She used to say small towns looked kinder in December, even when the people inside them were not. I parked beside Miller's Hardware and walked slowly toward the diner on Main Street where I always ordered eggs and black coffee on Tuesdays. Halfway there, I heard someone call my name from across the street. "Walter Bennett." I turned and saw Grace Holloway stepping out of a silver sedan with a thick wool coat wrapped tightly around her shoulders. I had not seen Grace in nearly 3 years, not since Eleanor's funeral. Her hair had gone almost completely silver now, but her sharp blue eyes looked exactly the same. Grace and Eleanor were college roommates long before I ever met either of them. She walked over carefully and gave me a quick hug that smelled faintly like lavender perfume and winter air. "You look tired," she said quietly. I laughed once under my breath. "That obvious?" She studied my face for a moment before nodding toward the diner window. "Coffee." We sat in the corner booth Eleanor used to prefer because she liked watching snow fall across Main Street, while people hurried between shops carrying paper bags and wrapped presents. For a while, Grace only stirred cream into her coffee without speaking. Then she reached into her leather bag and placed a thick manila envelope on the table between us. My name was written across the front in Eleanor's handwriting. The sight of it tightened something deep in my chest. "She asked me to keep this if anything ever felt wrong," Grace said softly. I stared at the envelope for several seconds before opening it carefully. Inside were copies of trust documents, handwritten notes, and one sealed letter dated almost 8 years earlier. Eleanor always dated everything. I unfolded the first page slowly while the diner noise faded into the background around me. "Walter, if you are reading this, then the house no longer feels like home." I stopped breathing for a moment after reading that line. Grace looked down at her untouched coffee. "She worried about Melissa from the beginning," she admitted quietly. "Not because she was cruel, because she was strategic." I continued reading while cold daylight pressed against the diner windows outside. Eleanor had quietly restructured portions of the ranch ownership years earlier after Melissa started pushing Jason to expand the business too aggressively. According to the documents in my hands, the land itself could not legally be sold or transferred without approval from the surviving trustee, me. My fingers rested against the paper while realization slowly settled over me. Melissa thought she was removing an old man from the family picture. She had no idea Eleanor had already protected the frame years ago. After meeting Grace, I stopped reacting to things the way I normally would have. That surprised even me. There was no anger left in the house anymore, just clarity. The following morning, I deliberately moved slower while carrying feed buckets near the barn. Melissa watched me through the kitchen window while speaking on her phone, and for the first time in months, I noticed satisfaction in her expression. Not happiness, relief. The kind people feel when they believe a problem is finally solving itself. By lunchtime, she knocked lightly on the guest house door holding a bowl of soup. "You should really take it easy," she said in a soft voice that almost sounded caring. "You have been forgetting things lately." I looked at her for a moment before nodding slowly. Maybe I am getting old after all. She smiled gently at that. Too gently. There is no shame in slowing down, Walter. I thanked her and accepted the soup while pretending not to notice the way her eyes drifted toward the cedar box near my dresser. Later that afternoon, Jason came by after work carrying grocery bags from town. He looked exhausted. His tie hung loose around his neck, and faint shadows rested beneath his eyes. Stress had started aging him faster than he realized. "Melissa says you forgot to lock the tractor shed yesterday," he said carefully while unpacking groceries onto the small counter. I frowned slightly like I was trying to remember. Did I? He hesitated. "Dad, maybe it is time we talked about making things easier around here." Easier. That word had become very popular lately. Easier meant signing documents without reading them. Easier meant staying quiet while your life was slowly packed into trash bags. Easier meant becoming invisible before you were even gone. I sat down slowly at the small table near the window and rubbed my hands together like the cold bothered me more than it actually did. "You probably know best," I said quietly. Jason exhaled in visible relief after hearing that sentence. That hurt more than I expected. For the next week, I continued playing the role they had already written for me. I misplaced harmless things on purpose. I asked Jason to repeat himself during conversations. Once, I stood quietly in the hallway pretending I had forgotten where I was going until Melissa exchanged a look with him over my shoulder. Every performance made them more comfortable. Every small act lowered their guard further. Meanwhile, I drove into town almost every afternoon after they left the ranch. I met privately with another attorney 2 counties over named Daniel Reeves, a man Eleanor once trusted during a land dispute years ago. Together, we reviewed every document from the envelope Grace gave me. Trust protections, ownership clauses, transfer restrictions. By Friday afternoon, Daniel leaned back in his office chair and removed his glasses slowly. "Walter," he said carefully, "they cannot legally sell a single acre of that ranch without your direct authorization." Outside his office window, snow had started falling lightly across the parking lot. I stared at the white flakes drifting past the glass while a strange calm settled over me. For months, they had treated me like a forgotten old man living on borrowed space. The truth was much simpler than that. They were standing inside a house built on permissions I had not yet withdrawn. 2 Sundays before Christmas, Melissa announced she wanted everyone together for what she called an important family dinner. She spent the entire afternoon preparing the dining room like a magazine photo shoot. Candles glowed along the center of the table beside polished silverware Eleanor once kept locked away for special occasions. A fresh pine garland wrapped around the staircase railing, and soft jazz played through hidden speakers in the ceiling. Everything looked warm. Everything felt staged. I arrived from the guest house a few minutes early wearing the same dark brown sweater Eleanor bought me one winter in Vermont nearly 15 years ago. Melissa glanced at it briefly before forcing a polite smile. "Walter, we are sitting you closer to the fireplace tonight, so you stay warm." Closer to the fireplace meant farther from the head of the table where I used to sit every Christmas Eve beside Eleanor. Jason avoided eye contact while pouring wine for guests from his office. Ethan sat quietly across from me drawing shapes in condensation on his water glass. Halfway through dinner, Melissa tapped her fork lightly against her wine glass and smiled around the room. "Before dessert," she announced, "Jason and I wanted to share some exciting plans for the future of the ranch." My fork rested silently against the plate while she continued speaking about renovations, partnerships, and expanding the property into luxury event spaces. Every sentence sounded carefully rehearsed. Then Harold Whitmore entered through the side hallway carrying a leather portfolio beneath his arm. I almost laughed when I saw him. Melissa had not even warned me the performance would include legal theater. "This is mostly procedural," Harold explained smoothly while handing papers around the table. "Just a few transition documents so future management decisions can move forward efficiently." Transition. Another polite word people use when they are trying to erase someone slowly. Jason finally looked at me then. "Dad, we talked about making things easier," he said carefully. "This only gives us authority to handle operations." Melissa reached over and touched his hand supportively before sliding a pen toward me across the polished table. "You do not need to stress over details anymore," she added softly. "We want you to enjoy your retirement." The room became very quiet after that. Even Ethan stopped moving. I picked up the pen slowly and studied the first page without speaking. Harold shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He knew immediately that I was actually reading the document instead of blindly signing it. Several paragraphs down, hidden beneath layers of legal language, was a clause granting development control over large portions of the ranch land. Exactly what Daniel Reeves warned me about. I placed the papers neatly back onto the table and folded my hands together. "Interesting," I said calmly. Melissa's smile tightened slightly. "Is something wrong?" she asked. I looked around the dining room for a long moment before answering. The chandelier light reflected softly across Eleanor's old silver serving trays while snow drifted quietly beyond the windows outside. Then I reached into the inside pocket of my coat and removed a thin manila envelope. "Actually," I said, placing it gently beside Harold's portfolio, "I believe there are a few documents everyone here has not seen yet." Nobody moved after I placed the envelope on the table. The fire crackled softly behind me while Harold Whitmore stared at the manila folder like he already knew exactly what was inside. Melissa recovered first. She gave a small laugh and leaned back in her chair with forced confidence. "Walter, if this is about old paperwork, we can review it another time." I looked at her calmly. "No," I said quietly. "I think tonight is the perfect time." Jason shifted uncomfortably beside her while I opened the envelope and removed several documents Daniel Reeves prepared earlier that week. The top page carried the official trust seal Eleanor insisted on creating years before her death. I slid the papers slowly across the table toward Harold. "You should read section 4 aloud," I said. Harold hesitated. For the first time since arriving, the smooth expression on his face cracked slightly around the edges. Melissa noticed immediately. "Harold?" she asked carefully. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat before reading in a low voice. "The Bennett family ranch and all associated land holdings cannot be sold, transferred, subdivided, or commercially redeveloped without direct written authorization from the surviving trustee." Silence settled heavily across the room after that. Jason frowned. "Surviving trustee?" Harold swallowed once before answering. "Your father." Ethan looked back and forth between all of us without understanding why the adults suddenly sounded afraid. Melissa's posture stiffened beside Jason. "That cannot be right," she said quickly. "You told us the transition process was already moving forward." Harold avoided her eyes completely now. "I was not aware these amended trust protections existed." That sentence changed everything. I watched realization slowly spread across Jason's face while years of ignored details finally connected inside his mind. The guest house, the missing photographs, the rushed paperwork. Melissa reached for her wine glass, but her hand trembled slightly before she steadied it against the tablecloth. "Walter," she began carefully, "nobody is trying to take advantage of you." I almost pitied how rehearsed the sentence sounded. "No," I asked quietly. "Then why was Harold preparing development authority documents without informing the legal trustee?" Jason turned toward her immediately after that. "Melissa, what is he talking about?" She opened her mouth too quickly. "This was supposed to help us financially. I was trying to protect our future." I watched Jason carefully then because for the first time in months he was no longer looking at me like a burden. He was looking at his wife like a stranger. Harold gathered the unsigned papers from the table with visibly nervous hands. Outside the windows, snow continued falling across the ranch in soft white silence while the dining room felt colder by the second. Ethan finally broke the tension in the only honest voice left in the room. "Grandpa built this place," he said quietly. "Why would anybody try taking it away from him?" Nobody answered him. Melissa stared down at her untouched wine. Jason rubbed one hand across his face like the room itself had suddenly become difficult to breathe inside. I folded Eleanor's trust documents carefully back into the envelope and stood from the table slowly. "I think dinner is over," I said. The ranch became strangely quiet after that dinner. For 3 days, nobody mentioned the trust documents again. Melissa stayed mostly upstairs with the bedroom door closed while Jason moved through the house like a man replaying old conversations in his head. Even the air inside the kitchen felt different now. Tighter. Careful. On the 4th morning, I stepped outside before sunrise carrying the last box from the guest house. Snow covered the pastures in a thin silver layer, and the barn stood dark against the pale winter sky. My truck engine rumbled softly while cold air drifted through the open driver's side door. Inside the box were the few things that still mattered to me. Eleanor's cardigan, old photographs, my radio from the workshop, the handwritten recipe cards I rescued from the trash bag. Nothing else felt worth carrying anymore. As I loaded the box into the truck bed, I heard the back door open behind me. Jason walked slowly across the frozen driveway with both hands buried in his coat pockets. He looked older than he had only a week earlier. "You are leaving," he said quietly. It was not a question. I nodded once. For a while, snow crunched beneath his boots as he stopped beside the truck. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he looked toward the main house where warm yellow light glowed through the kitchen windows. "I did not see it happening," he admitted finally. "Not until the other night." I studied my son carefully while morning wind moved across the ranch around us. There was shame in his face now. Real shame. Not because he lost control of the property, because he realized how easily he allowed someone else to reduce his own father into a guest inside his life. "Your mother tried to warn me years ago," I said softly. Jason lowered his eyes after that. "I should have listened to you more." I almost told him that fathers spend half their lives hoping their children eventually understand them. But age teaches you some truths arrive too late to fully repair what was broken before. Instead, I simply reached into my coat pocket and handed him a small brass key. "Storage unit on Maple Street," I explained. "Your mother's things are there. Do not let anyone throw them away again." Jason closed his hand tightly around the key without speaking. Behind us, the front curtains shifted slightly upstairs. Melissa was watching from the bedroom window. I could feel it without looking directly at her. But for the first time in months, her opinion no longer carried any weight inside me. Ethan suddenly burst through the back door, wearing his winter jacket halfway zipped. "Grandpa, wait." He ran carefully across the icy driveway, holding a folded drawing in his gloved hands. "I made this for your new place." I unfolded the paper slowly. It showed the ranch beneath a bright blue sky with a smaller house beside a lake in the corner. Two stick figures stood on a dock holding fishing poles. One was taller with gray hair. I smiled before folding the drawing carefully and placing it inside my coat pocket. An hour later, I drove away from the ranch while the sun slowly rose behind the hills. I did not feel angry anymore. I did not feel defeated either. For the first time in years, the silence around me felt honest. They spent so long treating me like I did not belong there that they never noticed something simple. I had already begun building a life beyond them long before I ever walked away.